Welcome to Political Paradigm. I'm Terry Ikumi. My guest today is an investment banker, an economist, and a former presidential aspirant on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, Mohammed Hayatu-Deen. Welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank you, Terry.
I'm glad that we can eventually have this conversation because we've had this schedule crisis. But thank you very much for honoring us with this invitation. Perhaps we should start with something most recent. And that's the meeting with the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar. It's not clear what the outcome of that meeting was, but I think it's fair enough to start by asking you what was the takeaway from that meeting.
Well, thank you. First and foremost, I think it's important to put it in perspective, in the sense that the convention took place at the end of May. The candidate had gone around to see a couple of people, fellow contestants. And thereafter, the fellow contestants had been meeting amongst themselves. And a particular group made up of about 7 contestants had a word with me. And it was actually agreed that it was important to go on a solidarity visit to the candidate. About 3 of them were out of the country or traveling elsewhere. So in the event, about 5 of us actually showed up for that meeting. The objectives were, number one, to give a very profound goodwill message to the candidate. Second, to try to build party unity and harmony. And the third was to devise ways and means of strategizing for the campaign that is coming up shortly. I would say that the candidate was delighted to have us. It was a very productive meeting, and we came up with a number of resolutions as to what needs to be done in order to build party harmony, unity, and progress, so that as we approach the elections of 2023, we'll be seen as one single, indivisible family.
But you will not disclose those resolutions, would you?
I'm not at liberty because we went into private session.
But when you say that it was a solidarity visit by all the aspirants at the time, and you say that about 3 of them were out of the country, does this go to say that everyone was invited, every former aspirant, the presidential aspirant was invited? Because I think I listened to Dele Momodu, who was part of that delegation, and he said that not everyone was invited. Was everyone invited, including, of course, the Rivers State government?
Not everyone was invited. A group of them, particularly from the southern part of the country, who had been meeting for quite a couple of weeks, asked me to actually join them on this trip and lead the delegation. So that was how it came about.
But I think there are concerns as to why the Rivers State governor was not invited. Is it safe to say that it's because of the, of course, frosty relationship between him and the presidential candidate?
Well, it's an open space, to be honest with you. As a sitting governor and also other contestants like Bukola Saraki, Tambol, etc., everybody has his own open access to the candidate. And it wasn't as if there was a deliberate attempt on the part of all of the candidates to actually group together to go on a solidarity visit. And if one has, cared to observe, people have been going in and out of the candidates, domain for quite some time. So this was just a particular segment of a much larger field that went there.
Did he seem worried about the state of affairs of the party, especially considering the fact that he was meeting with not all the aspirants at the time? Did he seem worried?
No, there would have been no reason for worry at all. He did not initiate the meeting. We initiated the meeting. He knew in advance who and who were coming. So the basis for getting worried does not even arise at all.
So let me ask you this question. What do you make, however, of the crisis in the party right now? The Rivers State governor, who says he's done so much for the party and feels betrayed by the party, at least to an extent, especially if you look at his demands, is insisting that the chairman must go. And that position now seems to be shared by the other governors from the South. Recall that the governor of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde, has just come out to talk about the crisis revolving around the Governors Forum chairmanship.
Well, as far as that issue is concerned, I think these are beaten tracks. It's been evolving ever since the end of the convention. And it does seem to me that as a party, these kind of matters, first of all, are normal. It is normal because we are operating in a political space, an open field where people go and contest opinions and ideas. In the final analysis, it is my own view, the party will get it all together so that we rally behind our candidate with the primary aim of ensuring that we're able to win the elections in February 2023.
But when you talk about addressing crisis within your party, there are concerns as to the issue of fairness within your party. And we only just heard that the BOT chairman has resigned. And in his opinion and that of the leadership of the party, it would seem that that's supposed to suffice in terms of fairness. What do you make of this resignation of the BOT chairman and its significance to resolving the crisis within your party?
I personally believe that it goes a very long way in pacifying people. But I think what is more important is that we mustn't lose sight of the ultimate aim. What is the fundamental objective here? The objective is actually to win the 2023 elections. I believe that it was a contest that was open, it was fair, it was balanced, it was objective, and the winner has prevailed. This is not the first time that we've had either conventions of political parties or elections. There's always a winner and a loser. And I think as good party people who believe in the supremacy of the party based on the fundamental pillars of our democracy, it is important to actually put these things behind us and forge ahead. I'm not at liberty at this interview to disclose to you what is going on behind closed doors, but there's feverish activity aimed at ensuring that all shades of opinion are heard and that through a very delicate process of compromise and consensus, we should be able to forge party unity so that we can face the campaign, which will take place in less than 2 weeks.
Well, it would seem that we're almost done with this issue, by the way, but I just want to exhaust it. It would seem that the options are now two. One, to accede to the demands of the River State Governor, Nyesom Wike, asking that the chairman should resign, or that the party could just move on without him because he doesn't seem like he would budge anytime soon. So the question is, what would you advise your party and the presidential candidates to do considering these two options?
I don't think either option is palatable. They need to meet somewhere along the way. Number one, the party chairman was duly elected at a convention. Number two, he has a phenomenal role to play during a very delicate transition as we transit from the convention towards the campaign and the general election. This is something from a private sector perspective that is almost akin to committing suicide, when in fact you remove a leadership when it is just about to go to war in order to win the battle, so to speak. I believe that it creates disharmony, instability, and chaos to remove the top echelon of the party at this very critical phase as we face the campaign and the election.
Very well then, let's move on. Let's backtrack for a moment and talk about your political history, or should I say journey so far. I understand that you've worked closely with past governments, even the military government as far back as 1992. You also worked with the Obasanjo administration, the Buhari administration as well. But talk to me about transitioning from the private sector to core politics, which you are now into.
Well, the thing is that my life has been a legacy of service. I was chief executive officer of two major private corporations in this country for a cumulative period of 20 years. And beyond that, I had also been an entrepreneur when I left paid employment in 2004 for about 15 years. And therefore, I'm a vital intersection at this point in my life. I felt that it was very important for me to stand on a much bigger canvas so that I can get deep-seated insight into the country. And so I deliberately and strategically decided to enter the terrain of politics. A couple of other reasons, I think, speak to my motive. Number one, I also feel that this country has been facing and has been beset with profound challenges, and that the political space has been left to your routine retail politicians. The fact about life really is that we are always involved in politics, in our homes, in schools, in hospitals, in the local governments, at the level of the presidency. And I think it is a fallacy to say that you're completely politically neutral. You may not like politics, but politics can actually not get away from you because you're always involved in it. And so I felt that it was important for us as citizens to begin to participate actively in the political process, either as an enlightened citizen who wants to participate without going for elective office, or as an enlightened citizen who actually wants to go for office. So that was one of the prime motivators as to why I went in. I believe I can make a huge difference.
Is this the politics that you had hoped for it to be? Because I recall that you were close to actually, going the distance with regard to the presidential race, presidential primary of the PDP, but you dropped out. And you dropped out because, according to you, the process was monetized. How would you compare the politics that you saw from afar to the politics that you got into?
Well, monetization is one aspect of it, but I think there was a fundamental legal or constitutional driver for my dropping out. When we started this process back in January of this year, the law of the land under the Electoral Act allowed, as far as the primaries is concerned, allowed various manner of people to become delegates. So you had the elected delegates made up of one person from the 724 local governments each. And for the PDP, we had another 3,000 people whom you call either statutory or official delegates. And so in the 3 months of my campaigning, going around all of the states in this country, I had actually made contact and heavily engaged all of these delegates. In Abuja alone, where most of the statutory and official delegates reside, there are about 17 different clusters with whom I had meetings. And so I had gotten to know them, they had gotten to know me, they understood my message. It resonated very well with almost all of them wherever I went in the town halls. Unfortunately, if you recall, the National Assembly committed a boo-boo when they actually forgot a vital aspect of the legislation when they were actually amending it. They dropped out the official delegates and sent the bill to the president. When the whistle was blown on them, they went ahead and amended it. Then they sent the amended bill to the president, who did not sign it for his own reasons. I do not know why. He did not sign it. And so right up to about 5 days before the convention, many of us were hoping, with our hands to our heart, that the president would actually sign. Unfortunately, he didn't sign it. On the eve of the convention, it was clear to me that the only people who are going to vote at the convention is the 774 delegates from the local governments, with about 3,000 being disenfranchised. I didn't know these people. I didn't feel that my chances were bright at that point in time. So I decided to drop out. That was a very fundamental reason. The issue of money is also important because essentially, when something is scarce in supply, what then happens is that a bidding war begins. And so everybody was then scrambling for these 774 delegates. Those were my reasons.
Quite understandable reasons, but Nigerians are quite not sure as to how you would remain in a party that is promising a better Nigeria. Meanwhile, that party produced a candidate through a process that you described as monetized.
I'm not sure that it was just that was the only consideration. Remember that a lot of these people actually have had a long gestation in politics. They've accumulated a lot of capital and a lot of goodwill. When I say capital, not financial capital, in terms of name recognition, in terms of people identifying with them. So it's unfair to say that it was just because of money that one particular person was produced. A combination of many factors, which have deep roots in history, going back, for example, like Atiku Abubakar as far back as 1992.
Okay, let's talk about fixing the country now. I listened to you in one of your interviews talk about the need to unite this country. And I'm wondering, how, with the level of division that seems to be spreading in this country, how do you expect that the next president would go about uniting this country?
Well, we were once united. I think there's so much disharmony in the country and so much damage that has been done that people are condemned to losing hope. I'm an optimist, but a realistic optimist. I think there are a number of tools that need to be put into play. Number one, it is critical for the president to put on the front burner the issue of bringing about harmony and balance, unifying this country as one of the primary goals of the new administration is critically important. And this should show not just in words, but also in deeds, by ensuring that everybody is actually brought inside this big tent, by making it possible for you and I to feel that regardless of our tongue, of our religious persuasion, of our geography, that we're all sons and daughters of the president. Third, to ensure that people are properly represented from all nooks and crannies of this country, in all institutions of government. Give everybody a chance. A hungry man is an angry man. Much of what you see is actually a reflection of deprivation. So it's a whole host of things that need to be implemented at the same time.
For us to get back to being united again.
Yes.
And you believe that the PDP and the presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, have what it takes to unite this country. Why?
Well, first of all, let's take a look at history. We started this experiment in May 1999. PDP has ruled this country for a cumulative period of 16 years. within the last 22 years, the greatest amount of progress has happened on the watch of the PDP. Simply because PDP is a huge organic party. It is all-inclusive. It allows people to go in freely. It listens, even though it may be rancorous, but it's also healthy. All shades of opinion and manner of opinion are actually catered for within the PDP. And on the watch of the PDP, we have seen the liberalization, deregulation, and privatization of this economy. We have seen economic output being expanded, substantial GDP growth of 8 to 9% over an extended period of time, the quality of life of citizens having been improved. So in terms of the background and the institutional history of what PDP has done and has not done, I think the evidence speaks to the fact that PDP has done things consistent with the kind of forces that are shaping global outcomes.
When you started out as a presidential aspirant, considering your history as an investment banker and an economist, you spoke so well. You seemed abreast of the situation, economic situation of the country, so much that analysts believed that you were what the country needed. Fast forward to today. Atiku Abubakar is the PDP presidential candidate. What qualities does he possess that convinces you that he can turn around the economic fortunes of this country?
Atiku Abubakar is a known quantity in this country. He's had a long and distinguished record of public service in this country, having worked for the Nigerian Customs for a very long period of time, almost becoming the Controller General. He went into politics in the very early 1990s and had proved his mettle, eventually rising to the second most powerful position in this country, that of Vice President of the Federal Republic. I did make reference earlier on to the fact that this country has seen a lot of economic and social progress under PDP, particularly under the Obasanjo administration. Atiku Abubakar was only one shot away from the presidency as his vice president. And I happen to know for a fact that President Obasanjo, being a delegator, had delegated substantial responsibilities to him in order to carry out very bold economic reforms in this country. I had worked with Vice President Atiku at the time in my capacity, not just as Chief Executive Officer of a bank, but also as Chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. And I can tell you that he has dug in the trenches. He understands this thing inside out. But more importantly, in terms of his DNA, it's important for you to understand that he's a free marketeer. He believes in the forces of the free market to unleash the entrepreneurial energies of the Nigerian people so that they can actually actualize their potential.
Sticking with the general elections and your presidential candidate, you stay in Lagos. You have businesses there as well. That's the same Lagos that the APC in general claims that its presidential candidate helped to rebuild. Do you attest to this? And how does he compare in terms of the developmental strides in Lagos with your candidate, Atiku Abubakar?
Well, the thing is that I have known Bola Tinubu for a very long period of time. You're right. I have tremendous respect for him. It is also true that on our own watch, while we were in Lagos growing up as young people, when I was running FSB International Bank, he had accumulated a huge pool of talent in order to help me run Lagos. There is no question that he's done his own bit in order to, develop Lagos into what it is. Others have come after him and done the same thing and created the bandwagon for others to emulate. Now, that's a microcosm. You're dealing with the state. Running a federal setup is something completely different. I'm not aware that he's actually ever had any stint of experience at the federal level, so I cannot even speak to that kind of experience. But my own job, both in this interview and outside, is to vigorously defend the candidature of Alhaji Atiku Abubakar over and above anybody else.
So they do not compare in terms of development?
I've just given you the backgrounds of the two people. You can make your own call from there.
So let me ask you this very important question. Within the APC, there seems to be the excitement that the Atiku or Kowa ticket is weak. And they allude just to not just the crisis within the party, but of course, the unprecedented support that Peter Obi is gathering. And they say that that kind of support would have ordinarily been attached to Atiku if they had worked together. Does this trouble you as well?
I'm a student of science, so I don't know what evidence people are citing to say that Peter Obi's candidate is going to hurt Atiku more than Bola Tinubu. I don't know where those kind of hypotheses is coming from. If I'm better enlightened, I can then make a commentary on that particular assertion. I've heard it out there.
So can I give you an analysis of what they say?
Okay, give me an analysis.
So they compare the 2019 elections to what could possibly happen in 2023. And they say that Obi and Atiku together polled 11 million votes plus, most of it from the South. And if you look at the South as it is right now, there are concerns within the party as to if the PDP can indeed win the South, considering the numbers that we see coming out of the Labour Party. So are you dismissing some of these million march rallies that you see as nothing and believing that it has no effect on the candidacy of Atiku Abubakar, especially in the South?
So let me first of all say that President Buhari is not on the ballot. He was a cult figure. And therefore, a lot of the people who voted in the North voted for him. There's now a vacuum. It is Atiku's to lose that. I can guarantee you that.
Especially in the North.
Especially in the North. So that's point number one. Point number two, the youth is a demographic, a particular demographic. One has to go back in time to see what percentage of the youth, even in America, actually enthused to turn out on election day. Number three, I do not know how much work Peter Obi has done or will do in order to appeal to northern sentiments. I really do not know, because it's still a long campaign season. But what I can tell you is that the PDP is not going to leave any part of northern Nigeria unturned. PDP is very strong in the South-South. It will get a bit of the Southwest votes, I guarantee you that. In the Southeast, it will run very, very strong. Because information that is available to me, which I've studied very, very carefully, indicates that there is no one particular person who is so strong that they are going to get anywhere even near 60% of the vote in the Southeast. So I think by the time the PDP is able to organize itself during this campaign and does what is right, I fundamentally believe that Atiku is going to be voted into power in February of 2023.
So it's dependent on if the PDP can get itself right ahead of
during the campaign, not during the campaign itself. This thing is going to fizzle out one way or the other.
What will fizzle out?
The so-called controversy that you people are actually feverishly.
Do you also feel that the Obi hype will die, just like most of your people in the PDP have said?
Well, I don't make those kind of statements. Like I said, I like working with numbers. I'm an economist by training. I really haven't looked at the numbers truthfully. But by the time the campaign starts and we begin to see polling, and I begin to talk to enlightened people, both internationally and here, we would begin to have a feel as to what the popularity of Peter Obi would be. But in the meantime, we're not scared at all. My own view is that once you get into, there are only two really, at this point in time, two parties, APC and PDP. The chips are going to fall
Either way.
in one of these two places. There's absolutely no doubt in my own mind. Barack Obama, at the time he went into the presidency, went into an established party. Look at every presidential candidate in the US who decided to be an independent or create a small party. The best of them was Ross Perot during George H.W. Bush's second term bid. He walked away with 19% of the popular vote, but as a billionaire, he spent over $300 million on the media. So the conventional wisdom is that if someone like Peter Obi had a 10 to 15-year project to create a magnificent machine that is robust, that has structures and everything, over a period of 7 to 10 years, then he can become a huge factor to be reckoned with. That's the view that I personally hold. I could be completely wrong. He might prove me wrong. I do not know. But in a developing country such as ours, with all of the emotions that are wrapped into this society, with all of the controversy and the deep-seated divisions and all these things by the time you get them together, and the lack of education, and the hunger, and the deprivation, and the poverty and disease, I would want to wait to see such a miracle happen in this election season.
Well, when you say that if he had the structure, we've heard this term used repeatedly. Established politicians, the PDP, the APC, have repeatedly said he does not have the structure. So I think, to be fair, if you could explain to us what a political party structure means for an individual who wants to win a presidential election.
Okay, so my own experience suggests to me that, number one, yes, politics is the art of the possible. But politics is also the art of highly experienced party whigs who have been deep-rooted over an extended period of time within their political parties, having established network of relationships. It's like banking. In banking, we rise or fall based on the kind of customers that we have. A customer defines the survival of a bank. And therefore, I will find it very hard to believe that Bank A, that has had a long-standing relationship with a customer for over a period of 20 or 25 years, and so much has actually gone back and forth between them, where the loyalties are very, very strong and deeply embedded, that such a customer overnight will just walk away from that bank and say, I'm closing my account and going somewhere else. Is pretty difficult. Politicians, I guarantee you, do far more than what a banker could ever do. They have an intricate network of matrix of relationships going down to the polling unit that is established and sustained over a long period of time. They sustain them through a variety of means. You have to get in to actually know what I'm talking about. So when we say structure, it's not just the physical structures, but the blood that flows through the veins of human beings that builds a binding relationship between the voter and the various candidates says a lot. Apart from that, there are all kinds of techniques that politicians are also very familiar with. I'm not talking about rigging, no, but all kinds of techniques that they have in their arsenal that they get to deploy throughout the campaign period. So that's what I mean. And I'm being fair even to myself, that if I had actually decided to go it alone or by getting into a small party, I wouldn't perhaps be sitting down here talking to you.
When you talk about our politics, it would seem as though you suggested that it's been the same. I mean, you say that 2023 will be no different. And you also just said that going alone or going away from the conventional way may not be fruitful. It raises the question, We've been back to democracy since 1999.
Yes.
During this time, we've conducted several elections.
Yes.
If we tie this back to 1993, to one of the freest elections, as most Nigerians would like to put it, and then we look at where we are now as a country with regard to how we conduct our elections and our way of life, would you say that we've made any progress?
We have.
What sort of progress have we made?
The progress we've made is that I think people, right now, I think, at more than any other time in our history, people, I think, are more concerned about who actually rules them. There is not a shadow of doubt about that. Thanks to the performance of the country, which has been terrible, people are now taking a more active and energetic interest in their own affairs as to who actually rules them. We are not yet there, but there's a movement that is beginning. Number two, I profoundly believe that people are also deeply interested in holding leaders accountable going forward. So accountability is a very, very important part of this particular process. And I think besides all of this, I think that today's politics is different because we've seen a lot of electoral reform. Results are going to be transmitted automatically to INEC. The capacity for people to actually manipulate elections or rig the elections at the polling booth is significantly curtailed at this point in time, if at all it is possible. What is actually more important is for INEC to actually rise up to the occasion and enforce the laws. INEC itself has blown the whistle the other day that people are trying to hack into the server. Now that, I think, is the elephant in the room that needs to be taken care of. And I'm absolutely certain, I have supreme confidence in the ability of INEC to continue to monitor and evaluate this and to stop it in its tracks, whoever is attempting to do that at any level of our elections. So I think we are getting there. Progress is slow, but we are going to get there. But what is even far more important to me is for young men and women, and even the adults and the elderly people, to actually take a much greater interest in their civic duties, to ensure that, A, they are able to provide significant inputs into platforms in terms of what are the issues that people are going to address when they actually get into office. Secondly, is to get them to actually go out there and vote their conscience, to get the right people in. And number three, while they are governing, that for me is even far more important, to come up with a modus operandi for ensuring that people are actively participating in the political and governance process to hold people accountable, and let not a governor or a president or a vice president load it over them.
So I was going to come to that last statement which you just made, because you just mentioned the governors. And I wonder if you see the same level of awareness of who becomes president among the youths or among the Nigerian populace at the same level as the subnationals. Do you think that we are now as aware as we are with subnational governance? So here, I don't know how many minutes we have left, but I wanted to touch on a very important subject here. The answer is definitely no. The president is under bright lights, locally and internationally. He gets a lot more supervision and invigilation, a lot more tracking and monitoring, because he's the father of the country. He's the leader. At the level of the governors, it is my well-informed view that the governors wield unbridled power that allows them in varying degrees, not every governor, to do anything under the sun and get away with it. They have far more leverage over the legislature, over the local courts in their jurisdiction, and much of what we see today by way of kidnapping, banditry, terrorism that you see, in my own humble opinion,
is a direct result of the neglect that the peoples of this country have actually faced. They say all politics is local, all governance is local. So governing this country properly, only at the federal level, no matter who the person is, even if he's a genius, is not going to work unless you actually get local governments and the states to do their own bit in a very, very big way. Otherwise, these problems are not going to go away. Now, let me also make a very, very important and profound point here. You, at the top of this interview, you didn't make reference to the issue of restructuring. I think that we need to politically and economically restructure this country. And if you ask me what should be done, I think that we have a bloated superstructure in terms of how the Constitution has organized our affairs in this country. I believe there are too many states gobbling a lot of money on government houses, on motor vehicles, on vast infrastructure, salaries and wages. When you are doing something wrong and you continue to repeat it, do not expect a different set of results. I would like to see this country unbundled into 6 components. So you have the northeast, the northwest, the north central, south, south, southwest, southeast. To be governed, if you like, call it any name you like, I'll give it the name of a premier. You make these, by the time you agglomerate them, you make them far more viable, economically and politically more viable units. In my own zone, which is the northeast zone, you are collapsing 6 governors into one, 6 government houses into one, fleet of motor vehicles, permanent secretaries, director generals, etc., etc. The funds that are released can then be applied towards the vital cause of development so that the people who actually vote us into office can get to have a fair shake in terms of what gets back to them, because that's the whole purpose. You are there, for goodness sake, in order to maximize the well-being of society, of the people of this country, and get them to feel proud to be citizens, and for them to live a very prosperous, happy life, for them to educate their children and so on and so forth. At the federal level, I believe that the federal government has become a monster. It's far too large in terms of the presidency from 1999 to date has expanded way beyond what was anticipated and is not in consonance with best practice. Productivity, as a result, is very, very low. People are falling over each other. There's a lot of endemic corruption that is going on, and so on and so forth. The legislature is crucial. So bear in mind what I told you about the states. Instead of 6 states House of Assembly, you only have 1.
Regional Assembly.
Regional Assembly for each of these regions. Imagine the amount of money that you're going to be saving.
So whether
just a second. At the federal level, I would like to see both states and the federal legislature become part-time. Secondly, it should be unicameral rather than bicameral. Make them part-time. The colossal amount of funds that are being spent on our legislature is just unbelievable. So the duty of the incoming president, whoever he is, I believe is incomplete and will not be speaking to his conscience and to his oath of office if he does not understand, recognize, and deal with these very severe problems, because in the final analysis, it trickles down to become a major economic problem. The federal government today is actually spending far more than it is earning. It's all resulting from these kind of things.
Where does local government administration come in all these?
So what I'm saying is that, first of all, the elections to the office of local government chairman, I think good people should go in there to go and contest election. We are so title-minded that people feel that local government is, nobody wants to go to the village or to a small town to go and become a local government chairman. But in developed societies, it is great people who have achieved great things, either at the state level or federal level, they now go back home to go and provide service to their locality. So you touch on a very important point here. The local government, I think, is very crucial to this whole thing because development is bottom-up. No matter what you do at the top and the middle, if the bottom is not well organized, well resourced, and effective, nothing can happen. But more importantly, all allocations should go directly to local governments when they are organized.
Okay, as we round off now, let's talk about the issue of security. I know that you're really particular about the state of affairs of this country with regards to security, which you think is a pathway to the disunity which we face in this country. And you talk about the distrust between the government and the citizens. One of the things that you're from Borno State.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the states that's been the worst hit
Absolutely.
by insurgency, specifically Boko Haram insurgency. And this government says that it's made so much progress with regards to addressing the insecurity challenge in the Northeast. You're from there. Do you attest to this?
I can attest to this from a personal experience. Many of my relations were kidnapped by Boko Haram. Some were killed. My very younger sister was in the warm comfort of her home when she and her 2 children were kidnapped and taken to Zambeza forest for a period of 2.5 years before she was able to escape by herself. Her son was killed. Her toddler was with her and she bolted out one night. I can relate to this problem directly. I can therefore feel the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Nigerians who have been displaced, both in the north and the south, or who have lost dear ones. But what is even more important to me is that at this stage in my life, for some reason, for some funny reason, Terry, I find it difficult to withstand bloodshed. I don't know whether it's part of growing up. This country is being bathed in vast oceans of blood. People being dispossessed, women being raped, children being raped and maimed and killed and destroyed. If not for this, perhaps I would not have entered politics. For me, if you ask me what is your 3 most important reasons for entering politics, amongst 10 other reasons, the 3 most important are insecurity, insecurity, insecurity. It's very, very dear to my heart. I thought, quite frankly, that after the Civil War, and I was on the border at Kefi Government College, not far away from the battlefront, not too far away, in Benue Plateau State at the time. I was of the view that we would never face a carnage like this. But here we are. Yet, in the time that I was in secondary school, in university, and throughout my career until the mid-1990s, Nigeria has virtually been a global policeman. We sent peacekeeping forces to Asia, other parts of the world. Our neighbors here, we took good care of them. Gambia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Central Africa. We were champions of the emancipation of Africa in Angola, in Mozambique, in South Africa. It kills me to see Nigeria descend to this level of abuse. It's so painful. And staring into the future, when I look at my life, I say, what is the worth of living? Does it make sense to actually live a life like this? It's very torturous and very painful. And I can tell you, there are senior citizens who have occupied major positions of responsibility in this country as statesmen who are deeply troubled by what is going on. And I just hope, believe and trust that when the PDP establishes a new government in February of next year, this particular issue of insecurity and economy will assume the primacy of place. It's so dear to our hearts.
Mr. Hayatu-Deen, I sympathize with you.
Thank you.
Based on your personal experience. But I also still want to know, if there's been improvement in the Northeast as claimed by this administration?
The answer is a blunt yes. There's been tremendous improvement in the Northeast. When I was in President Buhari's transition committee back in 2015, and I played a very prominent role in that committee, we had taken a lot of inputs from experts, both in the country and without. And we could literally paint the trajectory of what was going to happen to the rest of the North, and I dare say the rest of the country. Unfortunately, for some reason, this thing snowballed. And you know, it's very difficult to build, it's very, very easy to destroy. Much of this, however, at the bottom of it all really is lack of economic empowerment. These young men that you see who cannot earn, they are not educated, and even if they're educated, they don't have jobs. Many of them, large majority of them, are unable to have 5,000 naira of their own at any particular point, or even in 6 months. Perhaps 50 pence, perhaps 1 naira, 2 naira, thereabouts. They can't feed themselves. Their back is against the wall. And they get a new license, illegal license, to fend for themselves. They go on a lightning spree, make 10 million naira, 50 million naira by kidnapping for ransom. Once they do that, it becomes a steroid. They're on steroid. So they do it once, they do it twice, they do it 3 times. They are millionaires already. And they can't stop it. And on top of that, they are mostly involved in substance abuse. So because they're on substance abuse, they do not even know that they think they're killing a snake or a vampire. They don't know that they're killing their own brothers and sisters and their fellow citizens. Humanity is completely gone out of them. We have a huge task ahead of us to bring the country back together.
Just before we go, ahead of the 2023 general elections, what do you hope to see from the electoral umpire and perhaps the political players? Because there are also concerns now about the kind of conversations that are being held, and there are fears, especially from the civil society organizations, the election watchers, that the conversations are tilting towards violence.
For as long as I can remember, almost every election cycle is prefaced by these kind of concerns. It is fair to say that in previous election cycles, not even the last one, but much earlier on in the 90s and the early 2000s, there were specters of violence here and there, some of them quite egregious. But I think the evidence does not seem to suggest to me that any large-scale violence is going to take place. I just don't see the anecdotal data for me to begin to reach that kind of profound conclusion at this stage. We shall be watching very, very closely. What I expect will happen, or should happen, is that statesmen at various levels, including spiritual leaders, when speaking to their congregations, should actually ask for peace, calm and quiet. We already have enough blood, enough scale of destruction in this country. We cannot simply afford it. The electoral empire has a huge role to play in ensuring that in all of its actions and considerations, that it is actually showing an even hand of independence, balance, and objectivity. And that as it prosecutes this program towards February 2023, it should ensure that it does not allow any slippages to happen. Even if these were genuine mistakes, people are going to misinterpret it and feel that it's a biased empire. But I think Professor Mohammed Yakubu is a solid guy and I have full faith and confidence in him.
Mr. Mohammed Hayatu-Deen, it's been a pleasure, honest pleasure speaking with you, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jerry.
Well, that's Political Paradigm. Thank you for your time as well. Remember to catch this episode and others on YouTube. Simply search for Political Paradigm or go to channelstv.com. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.